Welcome back once again, Hashtag Nation, to another shit show for tonight.
That's it. Guns are blazing in the intro, Mario. Let's go. Let's go.
Ladies and gentlemen of Hashtag Nation, we are once again flanked by one guy who is a professional licensed referee and one guy who's a professional licensed ball buster. Joe and Ryan are decided to join us once again. We must the checks must have cleared this week, Paul. So we're good. We got
that's right.
We got him for another week.
That's not Ryan. It was very nice of you to step off your private jet in order to take this phone call. I love the investment in the technology too, with the headset, the double ear headphones. Those are top notch.
You just got done playing.
When you work from home, you've got to have only the best quality gear.
Yeah, I get that.
Welcome, like I said, everyone in the intro. As always, you can find Hashtag Sports material on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. All our episodes go to iTunes and Spotify. Tonight's show is sponsored by Mr. Rogers Homes in association with Crier.co.
Kudos to Joe first off. Before we get into that, kudos to Joe for smashing out draft pick reviews for like the entire league.
Hell yeah.
TikTok.
Literally.
Good job, Joe.
Just ripping it up on TikTok. This guy is going to be, well, I was going to say Jackson Mahomes, but no.
That's terrible. Nope.
Yeah, I'm going to try to catch Joe every time he drinks. I'm going to try to get him to spit out his drink. I've been trying for 5 years to get Paul to spit out his drink. It hasn't worked yet.
Nope.
So anyway, guys, as you can see in the title, we are going to be talking about the Buffalo Bills new stadium and the Dalton Kincaid craze that's all over Twitter, all over the news, all over everything. This guy hasn't even played a snap yet there are mixed reviews on Dalton Kincaid. If you are a Bills fan and you are on Twitter, I'm sure you've seen the Nate Geary rant, which was absolutely epic. I thought I had an out-of-body experience when I watched that. I thought it was hysterical. But only Drew can get guys to do that. I really think only Drew can get someone to.
Oh, at the Rock Power Report?
Oh, yeah, Drew over at the Rock Power Report. Just making him lose his mind on that. So let me kick it over to Paul first, because the stadium is kind of out of my realm of expertise. Talking about the Buffalo Bills new stadium.
Yeah.
Was it the $1.5 billion? And there's like supposed to be, I don't know the exact number. What was it? 850 million is coming from tax revenue or something like that.
Isn't that fun? Isn't that fun?
I'm good with it, guys. Good job.
Well, yeah, because Joe's in another state right now. I do look at it this way, right? Because there's a fine line between state money and county money. And as a non-Erie County resident, I'm only so mad about this, right? And Ryan, you're Genesee County?
Orleans, buddy.
Orleans? Yeah, so you don't care either,
yeah,
right? None of us are residents of Erie County. None of us, right? Not a single person.
Well,
so
yeah, I mean, it's also
like, I don't really care that much.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth noting, right, that the county piece of this is already taken care of, right? That was the money that they got from the reservations for the casino gambling. Mm-hmm. So that money's bought and paid for, right? There's no line item specifically on the budget to account for that. So that's already done and paid for. It's money that the county will never miss because they never had it until that stadium deal came into place. So the mechanics of it, I think, is really important to keep in mind if you are a taxpayer of New York State or Erie County. Mm. The other option is that you could be paying for a stadium that's not even in your state, right? Because, there was some New York State funding that went to fund the stadium in Rutherford, New Jersey for the Jets and Giants. So,
isn't that frustrating?
Don't forget about that too. And then, the last thing is also to keep in mind that stadium deal is going to continue to look better and better because the floodgates have been opened for public funding on these things. And even now, looking at the deal that the Titans struck with Nashville, over $1 billion is local money that's not coming directly from the stadium or from the team ownership or the NFL. So just like any NFL contract, it's important to keep in mind that stadium deals will look better and better as they age. I think, the Bills did a pretty good job of kind of balancing that. And again, for a city like Buffalo that had very little leverage when it came to what are you going to do if we don't give you a new stadium, I think they made out pretty well to not pay for the bulk majority of that stadium.
Yeah, and
in case you can't tell, I'm pro stadium for Buffalo. I'm pro keeping the team here, whatever it costs. You pay it and you keep them in the city.
Well, and I think, there's a very large part of this that, I'm happy with the location, right? I'd rather they stay in Orchard Park, to be perfectly frank and honest with you. I know there was a lot of people saying you should go downtown. I think that would restrict a lot of that pregame experience once you get into the downtown environment. Although it's very different. Buffalo's a very different animal than a lot of other cities. A lot of other cities have their stadium in whatever their major metropolitan area is. Obviously, there's exceptions there, but for the most part, Buffalo is staying true to the roots of the organization as far as staying in Orchard Park. So I really, whatever the cost was going to be to stay there, I was okay with, because I think once you start peeling back what makes being a Bills fan a great experience, that pregame ritual is a massive part of that. You relocate that to an area that's a bit more cumbersome, and you lose that wide open, no rules feeling like you have in the grass lots. I think as a primary piece of, this stadium deal was, okay, this is going to be the cost to build on the land that we already have, right? As opposed to, we need to acquire land. Now we need to build on it. The cost for that was just going to be exponentially huge and just not absorbable, to be honest.
Can I be honest?
Yeah. And I mean, when you get into, when you get into like downtown, right, it was one way in, one way out. That type of mentality, you can't have that when it's an NFL stadium. So there was a lot of infrastructure that went into play with that as well. And again, like you said, Paul, it was already ground that was owned, right? And NCCC, I think, is what's there currently. So it was that building's getting shut down. They're transitioning it over, or ECC, sorry, not NCCC, NCC.
Right.
So they're shutting that campus down. That whole lot is going to the new stadium. And
F them kids, Ryan. F them kids.
F them kid. Hey, I mean, when it comes to secondary education or a Bills stadium, how are you going to argue?
Guys, community college, it's fine. I kid. I joke.
Exclamation mark, because I love. No, but Paul, you put that much more eloquently than you did last time when we talked about a stadium going downtown. You basically said someone's going to fire a grill off a parking garage.
Yeah.
Ritual.
Yeah, exactly. No, you can't put Bills fans in a parking structure. That's a terrible idea. That is Jenga of doom. There's nothing is going to go well there. Somebody's going to release a greased pig in there from the top level. God only knows what's going to happen.
Jenga of doom idea. Is now trending on Twitter. Thanks, Paul.
But
although one thing I would keep in mind, Paul, and you'll be interested. So for those of you who don't already, I'm joining on Thursday. I'm going out to join Drew and Chris for the Rock Power Report. And we're actually going to do stadium talk, and we do pretty in-depth stadium talk. Worth the listen if you do think that the pregame experience is something valuable to Buffalo, because one of the things we're going to talk about is what to expect in terms of changes to that stadium pregame experience, because there will be some pretty significant changes. There's some laws that are getting ready to get passed, some ordinances that are going to get passed that are going to severely limit the ability of these extra lots, the mud lot, Pinto tailgate, all that kind of stuff. Like there's going to be a lot of new policies and procedures that are going to go into place, to the point where the guy who owns the mud lot actually just put his house up for sale. He's selling that because of what's going to come of the red tape that's going to be involved with parking, non-stadium parking, affiliated parking. So again, if you're interested in that, make sure you follow Rock Power Report, because we're going to go pretty in depth in that conversation. Well, it's worth noting that it's not going to be the same game day experience come 2026.
Well, and that home listed for for a couple $1 million. It
was like, I think it was like one and a quarter or 1.5, somewhere in that range. Yeah. Yeah.
That lot pays for
way
itself.
more than that house is worth. That's for sure. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, without a doubt.
How many cars do you think that go in there? I know that's Drew's home and his tailgate that he goes to. But how many cars?
Yeah, I mean, I would say a couple hundred probably.
Oh,
probably somewhere in that range. I mean, it's a hopping lot. If I'm not doing our family tailgate that we do, I'm usually heading over to Drew's, and it's definitely hopping for sure.
Oh, it is. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I went there a couple times, and I think that's the one thing. Like you guys, if I could just echo what you guys said, is that's what I think the Buffalo Bills wanted to preserve and keep, was the fact that the tailgate experience at a Bills game is almost, one of those things like that you love about it. I mean, sometimes more than the game. I mean, people are out there at like 6, 7 in the morning and they're tailgating, and it's a whole day experience. I mean, forget taking the kids to Disney, man. Go to a Buffalo Bills tailgate and in October or something, man. That's a lot of fun. That is pretty crazy.
And not to dominate the conversation, right? But as far as like stadium conversations goes, Buffalo got a pretty sweet deal here, right? With the way that these stadiums are funded nowadays, a lot more has been spent on much worse. So like, and I harken back to this a lot because I think it's just a perfect example of the state of Florida. But Miami-Dade County back in like 2008-ish, when they were building the park for the Marlins, they needed to raise like $500 million, right? So they sold bonds. They sold $500 million worth of bonds, right? Because Miami-Dade County didn't have the money to put up for the Marlins park. Unfortunately, those bonds were done at a really high interest rate, and when they're cashed in, it's going to cost $2.4 billion.
Ooh.
Right. Yeah.
Ooh.
So like, of course, if you were buying those bonds, you're pretty happy with that, right? Like you're pretty happy with a 3 times return on a bond, but that's the way that it is. And that's how sometimes people have to get creative raising money for stadiums. Again, Buffalo here, the land wasn't really an issue. You already owned it. It's the devil, I think changing stadium traffic drastically impacts attendance. And Joe, I know that you weren't obviously at a football game today, but you were just down in Philly, and Philly built a stadium not all that long ago. Right. So tell me a little bit about what your experience was in a major metropolitan today. Because you went to the Phillies game, right?
Right. Not only did I go to the Phillies game, the 76ers were playing game 4 in Philadelphia. So, and if you've ever been to Philadelphia, you got Lincoln Financial Field. Right next to that, you have the Wells Fargo Center where the Sixers play, and then right below where the Eagles play, you have where the Phillies play. So all of them are right next to each other, and they all share parking lots. And it can be a mess, like an absolute mess, especially a place like Philly. Buffalo doesn't have to worry about this at all. But when you have 2 things going on at one time. And another thing that made it worse was they have a casino in the same, like it's almost like 4 corners. You have the 3 stadiums and a casino. I'm like, this is the stupidest thing in the world. It's so dumb. Parking's a nightmare. Once you're there, it's kind of nice, but getting there can be an issue, especially. And there was an accident on 76. Like it was an accident on the way there, which of course slowed everything else down. It was just dumb.
Well, and Pittsburgh has something similar, right? Because PNC Park and Heinz Field are right next to each other. So Pittsburgh has something similar
right there.
And there's a casino.
They built
it
across. They built it across. I remember they had it on 3 Rivers.
And Nashville's got a nice layout too, because Nashville's down. You got where the Predators play, kind of like right in the center of the city.
Nobody cares about hockey.
And then it's a fairly short walk. It's a fairly short walk over the river to get you to Nissan Stadium, where the Titans play. It's about about a 10-minute walk or so, which isn't too bad.
And Broadway's dead. There's never anyone on Broadway there.
There's never anything going on down there. I was down there for a conference. It was 11 a.m. on a Wednesday, and it was unbelievably busy down there. It was like shoulder to shoulder. So
I was there a little bit ago, and I went to I didn't go there, but there was a Predators game, and there was I think Luke Combs concert going on at the Nissan Stadium.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't move.
Oh
I thought it was New Year's Eve. It was ridiculous.
South of the Mesa-Dixon, you can't get close to a Luke Combs concert. Yeah, no, it's terrible. You can't. Don't do that.
The volume of people that were there, it was absolutely like insane. Like, all right, you want to say, well, what about the revenue that it would generate if the Buffalo Bills decide to have it downtown? Well, okay. Well, you're taking all that revenue out of Orchard Park and then you're putting it downtown. But like the one way in, one way out, the traffic during game, going to games and coming away from games, would have just been absolutely awful. And then you would have had more, you would have had it just put more roads or wider roads or something, whatever they had to do down there, but there's just not enough space to put anything down there. I mean, I can understand wanting to have them both near each other, but it's not feasible.
I think that's sort of an underplayed dynamic here, Mario. When you start talking about moving the Bills out of Orchard Park, you're talking about crumpling that entire city as far as, the Bills are a major source of income. Because restaurants are built around it. Like that city revolves around that stadium, and taking the Bills out of there really does chop the knees out of that community. And I don't think you can consciously do that to move downtown where that community just kind of becomes a faceless, right? Like right now you could talk about the community as a whole, but you move them downtown, it's I'm glad they're staying where they're staying.
I want to ask Ryan too. Does that don't a lot of players stay in Orchard Park as well? Or I mean, moving that if a lot of players did stay in that area, Williamsville, Orchard Park, whatever, and they end up moving it downtown. I mean, it's kind of annoying. Like you're not gonna have a nice little 5-minute drive to the stadium, but
it's travel time. I mean, because let's be realistic. Like an NFL player isn't gonna live in the city of Buffalo, right? Like that's not New York City with their vast skyline and multiple penthouse locations that they can get. So yeah, I mean it would be a pain for the players as well. And I mean, again, keep in mind, I mean, again, Buffalo is kind of like a one way in, one way out type of city. I mean, there's other ways to get in, but if you're coming downtown, I mean, there's basically one direction, and that's just the logistics of it just become a kind of a nightmare. For any of you who have ever been to a long time ago a Sabres playoff game, right? Like it's an absolute nightmare to try to get into the city for a game, and you're talking about a half stadium when it comes to what the Bills' new stadium is going to look like. So, I mean, I think as great as it would be to have the potential for maybe 8 times a year, walk downtown, go park downtown, go to the Bills game, go to the bars, get dinner, get drinks, go to a Sabres game, and then go home at the end of the night. Like that 8 times a year isn't worth the absolute nightmare of buying up property and eminent domain and all the lawsuits that come with that when you start to try to take property that doesn't belong to you, to then build out infrastructure with roads and bridges and all that stuff. It's just, you're talking a multi-billion-dollar investment from the state and county versus what amounts to $1.4 billion. And that's what it's locked in at, because again, in your agreement with the Bills are going to pay for any overages as a result of things like inflation and all that kind of stuff. It's a pretty good deal overall, I think, for the city of Buffalo and specifically Erie County.
Yeah, and the other part of that is, once you move downtown, they were with the locations that they were searching and hunting at. It was actually a very big possibility that they were going to have parking where fans could go by boat from parking lot, take a boat and take a shuttle to the stadium from there. And there is absolutely not a single good idea of putting a bunch of drunken Bills fans on a ferry going down the river and terrible idea.
They do that in Pittsburgh, or at least they used to. When I went to a Steelers game, they did do that in Pittsburgh. You park on the other side of the rivers and take a ferry over. So it's not like an unthinkable idea. But yeah, I get your point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know we're not really talking about apples and oranges when we talk about Pittsburgh fans and Bills fans, but I got to side with Paul on this one. I mean, you want to put. Yeah, we're all going to go on the ferry and we're going to be there. You know how many coolers or kegs would be on that damn thing? Here we go, guys. Yeah. Let's rock and roll.
Mix Bills fans with flaming tables and boats. Like, what could possibly go wrong? Right?
Right, yeah, precisely.
The second coming of the Titanic. That thing's going to hit something.
Yeah, randomly discarded kegs just floating down the river. It'd be great.
Right ahead. No, that's a keg.
Yeah, that's right.
So, guys, should we even try to scream into the void here, talking about dome versus no dome? Because I know that was a big point of contention with a lot of people. Well, the fact that the Buffalo Bills would not get a dome, and then therefore the amount of possibilities that you could have if the Buffalo Bills decide to go with a dome, because then you can bring even more revenue than just the 8 games and possible playoff games that you would have. You'd be able to have more concerts there throughout the winter. You'd be able to do a bunch of different things, maybe even host big games or, NCAA, Final Four games and stuff like that. So that all being said, what is your guys? I want to start with Joe on this one. What's your take versus the dome versus no dome?
Well, even and to your point, like even like the Frozen Four, right? For hockey, college hockey, like you could host that there then. To be honest, I never thought that dome was really a possibility. Just simply because you think about what happened when the Bills have been forced to move to Detroit or another city to play football 2 times in the last 10 years due to bad snowstorms. Imagine remember what happened in Minnesota, like a few before they got their new stadium. Like imagine that. Now I know domes in. Yeah, when it caved in. Like I know domes are much more advanced than they were back then, but you're still talking about a lot of snow on a rooftop. And even if you're like, oh, we'll remove it. Well, think about the cost of that then, like, because you have to do that every single year. So to me personally, I didn't think a dome was ever really a viable option, just due to those factors. So, I'm not surprised it's open stadium. It does mean, you can't have concerts in the winter. You can't play on certain things. But there are plenty of stadiums in cold that are open that you could still do some fun things. You could, think about what they did with the outdoor hockey game in Buffalo. Like, you could do things like that. You can still make it a fun place to be, even though it's not indoor like some people may have wanted.
Yeah. Ryan, what do you think about that? Dome versus no dome?
I think as
a season ticket holder, we got to mention that too. Ryan is a season ticket holder.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not getting any younger, so the idea of a dome is great for me. But I think the realistic expectations were never a dome. It was never going to happen. And honestly, people who have these delusions that the city of Buffalo, again, is some type of draw to these giant events that are going to occur when you have a dome that take place in, February and March and April. Like, it's not. You're not going to get more concerts that come into Buffalo because you have a dome. You've had the Frozen Four come to KeyBank Arena, right? They've already played there once. So, I mean, you've had the NFL draft, but listen, Buffalo's not getting a Super Bowl. They're not going to get a Final Four. They're not going to get these giant mecca concerts that come through anything other than the summer to play, because it's just not a draw. There's not the infrastructure. There's not the hotel, builds. There's no high-end dining in most cases. Like, there's a lot of things that occur when you talk about national and international events that Buffalo just doesn't have. There's nothing wrong with the fact that they don't have it, but I think people in general just need to stop thinking that just because we get a new stadium, we're going to get all of these new shiny things that are going to bring all kinds of economy in to the area, because it's just not going to happen. Nobody willingly comes to Buffalo for stuff, right? So when you get these concert tours, like, I get to play inside, but I still have to go to Buffalo in February. Like, who wants to do that, right? I live here. I don't even want to be here in February. So I just don't think logistically it was ever going to happen. So building a dome would really be a waste of money, because I don't think it really would increase what you would draw as a result.
So I'm going to counter with a couple things, right? First off, Ryan just slyly slid in there that the Bills aren't going to get a Super Bowl. And my whole time I was like, all I want's a WrestleMania. That's it. It doesn't matter. They did a WrestleMania at MetLife, right? They did it outdoor. They had a Super Bowl at MetLife, right? That was outdoor. Yep. I think Ryan's point about the Bills not getting a Super Bowl is simply because there's a lot of things that go along with having a Super Bowl that Orchard Park simply by itself can't support in any form or fashion, right? The restaurants that you need, the hotels that you need, that just the size of the roads. Yeah.
They also don't want the Bills to play a home game. I mean, let's just be honest there.
I know that they should just let the Raiders host it every year then. In any case, I do disagree with Ryan, because I think it's a pretty broad statement from the NFL standpoint. When you build a new stadium and they have been getting on you for building a new stadium for 20 years, and then you don't get a Super Bowl, that's a pretty big stab, especially from a commissioner who is supposed to be from this area. It seems like he forgets that every now and again, that he's
not supposed to be from this area. He is from this area.
Supposedly from this area. I mean, look, if even looking at the new stadium, right? New stadium equals Super Bowl. That's not necessarily true. There are still requirements, right? The Bills Stadium will be the first new stadium that's built that doesn't meet the Super Bowl requirements that we've been aware of. There's not going to be 70,000 seats. That's a non-starter for the NFL. Right. 70,000 seats is the minimum, and it's hard seats. You can get a waiver to add temporary seats. Well, that's what Dallas did. Yeah, Dallas got a waiver.
But you're not going to, I mean, the new stadium is supposed to be 63,000 seats, somewhere in that range. Mm-hmm. So where are you going to get 7,000 temporary seats to put in a stadium and then play a football game?
It's even beyond that. Like, I'm looking at the requirements right now, and one of the requirements says the NFL requires, and this is on CBSSports.com, kind of reliable, NFL requires a climate-controlled dome stadium if average temperature for that region falls below 50 degrees.
Which is nonsense, because they played one at MetLife not all that long ago. but that might have
that's
been
true. But MetLife, New York City winter isn't Buffalo winter, right? Like they're in the same climate, same region, but they're not. It's not the same type of weather.
When was the MetLife Super Bowl? Because the article I'm
2015.
2015.
I think 2014, 2015. It was the.
Yeah, I mean, there's other requirements.
Broncos Seahawks one.
I'm looking at all.
There's other requirements that probably disqualify the Bills.
Right.
35%, like hotel rooms. There have to be enough hotel rooms for 35% of capacity within an hour drive. That's probably going to be tough to reach. There's a requirement for 35,000 parking spots within walking distance. Again, that's probably tough to reach.
That's probably tough.
So like, I mean. Currently, they've upgraded it to 2 18-hole golf courses and playable golf courses and bowling alleys within the area too. I mean,
hey! There's plenty of bowling alleys in Western New York, and don't you keep that smut out of your mouth. There's plenty of bowling alleys. Listen, there's a lot of Polish people. It's the only thing we do good. Okay, we bowl. That's it. So
all
be
those
careful
stuff.
There.
All those stats Ryan's just rattling off. I'm just sitting there going, "Oh no, we suck again." The whole thing's going through my head the entire time. Like, why not? Jesus.
Well, the last thing about the stadium that I think is for those who really wanted a dome, and to Ryan's point, you're right. The rules that the NFL has laid out really does tell you that a Super Bowl is highly unlikely unless something remarkable were to happen. But building a dome stadium does make KeyBank Center, also owned by the Pagulas, direct competition to those larger level events, right? Because KeyBank Center hosts all your large indoor events. You build another large indoor stadium, and there's just not a benefit to you, right? From a financial standpoint, because you've got one indoor stadium and then another really big indoor stadium. You're likely not going to get, if an event isn't coming here because KeyBank is big enough, the event probably wasn't coming anyway. Right. I think that's just the business that the Pagulas are likely running right now. And that's just the reality of the situation. You might not like it, but it's true. You wanted to keep a team in Buffalo. There's going to be some compromises there.
Yeah. So is it officially being dubbed the house that Allen built, or are we're not doing that yet?
Christen it with the Super Bowl year, and
That's true. That's true.
So I mean, the stadiums talk is going to be going on for ages, and we're going to be doing that as well, coming up in some more episodes. But
Sean asking if the NFL has rules on alcohol requirements. Whatever it is, we got it covered. I think we'd be good.
The fact that the Bills broke a 17
per capita.
Yeah.
If it's drinks per capita, we're golden.
Bills broke a 17-year drought, and Bills Mafia drank Jacksonville dry. I mean, I think I think the Bills would meet the requirement there, even if there wasn't anybody else. Okay, so guys, I want to transition over to good old Dalton Kincaid. His name is Dalton. A lot of stuff going on throughout the internet and everything else. People still talking about Buffalo Bills. Some wasting a pick on a tight end in the first round. I know we talked a little bit about it after the draft when he was selected, but there seems to be a lot of ongoing talk with Dalton Kincaid, even though he has not even played a snap for the Buffalo Bills yet, and there's all this buzz about him. I want to start with Ryan and go to Joe. Ryan, why do you think that Kincaid is already at this point after being drafted so polarizing for so many Buffalo Bills fans? Is it the fact that the Bills haven't, this is like foreign territory for a lot of Buffalo Bills fans, where your team is actually very, very good, and you had to replace a couple of positions in the draft, in free agency and whatnot. Now you're first round tight end, the only tight end taken in the first round. It's like, what are we doing? We just lost Edmonds. Why didn't we go somewhere else with that pick? But what is your take on the whole Kincaid situation going on in Buffalo right now?
I think there's two things. One is he's not a wide receiver, right? He doesn't have that tag in front of his name. And I think a lot of people coming into the draft felt that wide receiver was a giant need on this team, which I agree, it probably was a giant need on this team. So he's not a wide receiver. That's one. The second is that in the history of the Buffalo Bills, you can't name a tight end that's really been worth the first round pick, right? I mean, they just haven't, as a franchise, utilized the wide receiver position. The tight end position, when your best tight end in franchise history is probably Pete Metzelaars. Like that's not a franchise that uses the tight end or has been good at identifying tight end talent and bringing them in. So that's the other thing. And then I guess I would add a third is you just gave a big contract to Dawson Knox and then proceeded to use him arguably less efficiently than you had used him the year before you gave him the contract. So I think there's those three things that just leave Bills fans wanting when it comes to the tight end position. But at the end of the day, just like we talked about on draft night or the day after, if you look at him as a weapon and not a tight end or not a position type player, you just look at your pass catchers, your skill position guys as weapons. I think it makes a lot of sense to just go out and get the one that fits your scheme and what you want to run the best. And that's probably where Kincaid fits in.
Yeah. Just going through, I just looked up Buffalo Bills history of tight ends really quick. And when Charles Clay is 14th on that list,
yeah.
That is no bueno at all.
Yeah. I mean, your top two tight ends are arguably like Metzelaars and Riemersma, right? Like that's not exactly a heralded crew.
How dare you spit on the good name of Scott Chandler?
Yes.
Is it like a requirement to be the biggest ginger to play tight end for the Bills? Is that a requirement? It just feels like it is now.
I mean, we could go through it. We can go through a couple of tight ends.
There's actually a case to be made that just be a big ginger, the Bills will draft you to play tight end.
If you can read through that list, how far down the list before the name brings a smile to your face? Because there's a lot of names that you can go through that are tight ends for the Bills in history that just make you laugh more than make you remember the fond times.
I'll pull it out. Particularly, obviously, one is Metzelaars. Two, they have Dawson Knox. Then they have three, it was Riemersma. You got Keith McKellar.
So Dawson Knox is already the second best.
No, statistically, Daniel Gari. Statistically, Charles Clay is the greatest tight end in Bills history.
Oh my god.
So Mark Campbell's number 10th. I don't even know who he is. You got a couple of guys that have their football card is their profile pic on here. A couple of them were drawn on by a left-handed kid.
We're drawing lefties. Hey,
Lee Smith is 16th on this current list. Robert Royal 17th. Jason Krohn,
Robert Royal. There's an interesting one.
Man.
Logan
Thomas was the one that got away.
Yeah.
Tommy Sweeney is 23rd on this list. Let's just put it that way. Are you kidding me with this?
With as many touchdown receptions as Deion Dawkins has, he should be top 20 on that list.
I'm scrolling.
Tackle eligible. Tackle eligible should count as.
I keep scrolling down, hoping to see Paul or Joe on this. Oh my god. So Joe, what do you think, man? Yeah, the whole Dalton Kincaid craze. So
I think that the fact that he's a tight end, and you look at the usage of tight ends last year, Dawson Knox, 65 targets, 48 receptions. A lot of Bills fans look at that and say, oh, well, we just don't use tight ends. And I think that you got to look at the weapon itself. Like Ryan said, like it's not about tight end because he's not. The moment we draft him, even on this when we did this right after we drafted him, one of the things that people were saying about him is always not a good run blocker, right? Yeah. But that's not why he's there. Like when the Bills think about tight ends, we think of tight ends. You go down that list, they could run block, and that's mostly why the Bills had him there. And they catch, sure, that's something they could do. But we've never had a Antonio Gates or Jimmy Graham or someone like that at tight end who can fit in the slot and just operate from the slot. And, one thing that Bills fans might not know is that this guy only played 1 year of high school football. He's only in his 5th or 6th year of actually playing football at a major level. So he was a 0-star recruit. So I think that, he also can be given more time and maybe develop into a better blocker if need be. But this guy's not a blocker. He's a slot receiver, right? That's what everyone's trying to say. He's a slot receiver. And Mario, you said great. If you told me going into the draft, we got the best hands of the draft, would you be upset about that?
No, I wouldn't be mad. I wouldn't be mad at that at all. But I know Paul. So basically, for this pick not to be disappointed, Kincaid has to be the greatest side. Well, it's interesting because Bills fan, he brings up a great point.
three sustained years of success, and I think he'll have that title. So
yeah,
not a high bar.
Apparently, if you make it to your second contract, you're going to be pretty good in the Buffalo Bills' eyes. You know, I just wanted to throw this up on the screen.
You're in line for the Wall of Fame if you make it to your second contract. Like you're on your way to the Wall of Fame.
So what I wanted to do, like I said, I think it's a combination of the fact of where he was drafted and the perceptive need of what the Buffalo Bills needed at the time. Everyone wanted to get a wide receiver to put across from Diggs, being that Gabe Davis's contract is coming up, being that Khalil Shakir didn't get a lot of run last year, and a bunch of other things that were combined in it. And then you end up getting a tight end and the Dawson Knox extension. So it didn't make a lot of sense. So I decided to first round tight ends, taken since 2010. And obviously you could see some names on this list. I think it's very, very interesting. You got Gresham, Eifert, Ebron, Ingram, Njoku, Hurst, Fant, Hawkinson, and Kyle Pitts in 2021. Obviously some gaps in there, so 2010 and 2013, 2014 and 2017, and then they draft two in the first round, and then you got 19. So if you look at all of those guys in there, and you start to figure out, am I missing OJ Howard on that list? Was he for?
No,
I am missing OJ.
No,
Howard.
OJ Howard was no.
He wasn't.
No.
Okay. So that all being said, when you look at all of those combined, I can't see one guy on this list where he's drafted into a team that is perceived to be running a different philosophy offensively the following year. Like when I looked at all of these teams, they were just going into the tight end position and they were going to just try to learn. And the guys, the rookie seasons, were very, very modest, with the tight end position. I think one of the big questions that's coming up for Buffalo Bills fans, and, Paul, help me out on this one. The Buffalo Bills they're not known for running two tight end sets, or like they like to call 12 personnel, one running back, two tight ends. They're not known for doing that. Dorsey's not known for doing that. He may have had some time when he was in Carolina where he ran that very minimal, but no one in Buffalo has seen that yet out of him. And that seems like a drastic personnel change, but it's not because of what Joe said. He's going to be a slot receiver anyway. Right. So even though by title he's a tight end, he's going to be flexed out. He's not going to be in line. He's not going to be Lee Smith. So that being intertwined, do you see what do you see for Kincaid in comparison to all these other guys?
So, oh man. All right. So I just want to point out that Mario runs our Twitter handle. So when you at us, it's him. So if you want to come for me, you got to do it in the comments section of YouTube, because that's what I run. Okay.
What did I do now?
What? No, I'm just saying for those watching, right? For those watching, if you want to come after me, do it in the comments section. If you do it on Twitter, you're going to be going after the wrong guy. All right. So first off, you are missing OJ Howard. He was drafted 19th, but he's done nothing. So it's not leaving him off the list.
They forgot about him.
Yeah. Former Buffalo Bill OJ Howard. How dare you? But
who's 15th all time?
15th all time on the list. You didn't make it out of the preseason. Still 15th all time. But I think, when you look at this list, and we're just going to hold on comparing Dalton Kincaid to these players, right? But when you look at this list, if you talk about Pitts, Hawkinson, Fant, Hurst, not so much, Njoku, Ingram, those guys were all, you could say the exact same thing about them that you say about Dalton Kincaid, is that the guy is just, he's a great athlete at the position. Well, we don't really know as last week, right? Because Dalton Kincaid didn't do any of the RAS score stuff. So we don't actually have a RAS score for him. So we can't compare him as an athlete, right? But a lot of that, you could say, well, these guys are really receivers playing the tight end position. You could say that about that recent crop of players. The last real true tight end to be drafted out of this list is Ebron, right? According to the role of what we think of a typical tight end. And that was all the way back in 2014. That was a decade ago at this point, right? Mm-hmm. So I think you could say that about a lot of the players on the list, was that, yeah, they're a true pass catcher, right? And then you look at the production, you go, well, those are career numbers, right? Mm-hmm. Those are career numbers. And some of those people have been in the NFL for quite some time. I think the other side of that coin is that Dalton Kincaid's 24. Dawson Knox is 26, right? Mm-hmm. So the level of physical development that Kincaid had against other college athletes is a little different, right? So we're talking about a guy who had 141 targets in the last 3 seasons, and 93 of them were last year, right? Like we're talking about one really, really nice year of college production. And then 2 years ago, we had 3 targets, right? Last year, I think he had 40 some targets the year prior to last. You're talking about a guy that doesn't have a ton of targets in the course of what you see in a typical college career to call somebody a great pass catcher. Zay Flowers had almost as many targets this year as Kincaid has had his entire college career, right? Yeah. So we're talking about fractions of college production, right? So that's point number one. Point number two is that there's a very, very strong case that you can call Dalton Kincaid the Aaron Maben of tight ends. For that reason specifically, right? And that's why I said, if you want to come at me in the comments section, you just come on right ahead. You go ahead and do that. But the fact of the matter is we're talking about guys that didn't have a ton of college production, and we're saying all these great things about him off of effectively 1 year, right? And I think you have to be mindful of the fact that while he's had a rocket ride to the top, right? In order to sustain that success in the NFL, it's a harder climb. Right. But again, he's an older prospect. So will he be able to make those adjustments? I don't know. You might have seen the peak of Dalton Kincaid. You might not have. But again, he's an older prospect. So that's what I mean when, you start talking about, well, why'd you draft Dalton Kincaid? You got Dawson Knox on a contract extension. Guys, they're only a couple of years away from each other in total age. But the mileage is definitely very different.
Yeah. I mean, they didn't draft Chris Winkie, Paul. I mean, you're talking about him being 24. Jesus. He's a fossil. But then I looked up Kelsey and Kittle just to mess around. I mean, Kelsey was a 3rd round pick in 2013, and Kittle was a 5th round pick in 2017. And you look at 2017, in the 1st round was Ingram and Njoku. And I think you can make the argument. Paul is the Ramon Humber of YouTube. Yeah, I think you can make the argument when those guys came into the league and they came into the league at the same time, there happened to be maybe a philosophical shift in how your tight end is supposed to be. Like we could say a bunch of things about the possibility of what Dalton Kincaid could do, but until he is literally put in the position to be successful. I mean, Kelsey went to Reed. There was no way he was going to be unsuccessful in there. Right. Kittle just is a freak athlete, but Kittle and with an outstanding offensive mind, the last 2 seasons has been the definition of lackluster. Injuries have been a problem, right? Oh yeah. But Kittle is a great athlete again at the position, but he's getting 4 targets a game. He's very high and low. Like there's games where he has like 10 catches for like 150 yards, and he'll have 1 catch for 3 yards. As a fantasy owner of George Kittle, I don't try me on this. I know these stats.
Believe me, I've tried to trade him to Laisel for 3 seasons. Don't worry. He doesn't want him. He doesn't want him. Look at him. He's over there like, I got Mark Andrews.
I went early on Andrews and Kelsey, and I'm hanging on to him for dear life in Dynasty. they'll roll Kelsey out of my lineup like they roll him off the field.
So yeah, I'm just when we go over I think the potential is there for the kid. The big question mark is going to be for me is going to be Dorsey. Is he going to put him in a position to succeed? Is he going to do some things where he puts the personnel in there? Because a lot of times, you put on the personnel out there, they're going 2 tight ends. Okay, we're going to have to combat with certain things. It opens up so many more things for your offense if you're able to be creative with those 2 tight end sets from a technicality standpoint. You're going to a 2 tight end set. Okay, they're not really tight ends though, in the proverbial sense that we remember when we were growing up. So that all being said and being intertwined, you start to think, well, will Dalton Kincaid, his first year, if he has 50 catches, is that a successful year for him? Well, you're going to have a lot of Bills fans that are going to go, no, he needs to have 80 catches, 12 touchdowns, 1,000. I just don't think it's feasible. Does the kid have the potential with the things that you've seen in his one really, flashy season at Utah? Well, yeah, you could see him doing that stuff, but you could have seen Dawson Knox do that too. He's an athletic freak in his own right. So I think but just how polarizing the kid has been after being drafted 2 weeks ago. And everyone's like, oh, what's going on here? What's going on there? Or last week. Everyone's like, oh my God, he's done. Like he literally got drafted by the Bills in the 1st round, and he's 17th on the list of all-time greatest Bills. Like it's Bills tight ends. It's not even funny. Like,
I also wanted to bring up the point. The first thing that came to my mind, or one of the first things that came to my mind, Mario, when you showed that list, Who's the best quarterback throwing balls to that drafted tight end on that list?
Oh, that's a good one.
Joe Flacco to Hayden
Harris. I would go Carson Palmer to Gresham.
Yeah. Matt Ryan to Pitts.
Matt Ryan. Is Matt Ryan at the end of his career though?
The corpse of Matt Ryan.
It goes to Matt Ryan. Yeah. I don't know.
Guys, Brock Osweiler to Noah Fant. Come on. But I think that's a good point, right? Is that if you take a look at the quarterbacks that the guys have played with, Ebron played with Roethlisberger, but he was with Stafford before that, right?
Yes.
And no one's saying that Stafford's not a good quarterback, but Detroit Stafford is a lot different than St. Louis Rams Stafford.
Stafford's got two guys on this list,
Rams,
doesn't he?
Excuse me, LA Rams. Yeah.
Doesn't he have two guys on this list?
Yeah.
He threw to Hawkinson for a season, didn't he?
Wait, hold on. Eifert played with Carson Palmer. So Eifert to Palmer.
Yeah, that was Mario's answer.
Yeah.
Mario's answer. Yeah.
Oh, I don't listen to him. Sorry, guys.
Well, yeah, it's okay. I mean, David Njoku had like 7 quarterbacks throw to him, so I don't even know. He's got 112 receptions from 18 guys. Like, what the hell's going on here? Jesus Christ. Yeah, that's a great point, though, Joe. I mean, you look at that list, you look at the guys that are actually throwing the ball to these guys, and you're like, oh my God. Like,
but I think you brought up another interesting point to sidestep that, right? Is you said in 2017 the goal of the tight end changed, right? Well, if you look at the production of the tight ends drafted prior to 2017, they have triple the amount of touchdowns than the guys drafted 2017 and after. Why is that, right? Like, if you really look at that list, you see none of those guys, none of them from 2017 to current have more than 14 touchdowns for a career. Yeah, 13. Ingram's got 13. I think he got 8 of those his rookie year. You know, so 6 that rookie year. Okay, got half his career production in his rookie year. That's what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, and think about production wise from a rookie tight end, right? I mean, let's put it back in fantasy perspectives because we talked about that a little bit. I mean, if you just take fantasy production, there's only been 8 tight ends since 2000 that have scored over 140 points, fantasy points. So, and so when you talk about the stat lines, right? Like Evan Ingram was one in his rookie season, 722 yards, 6 touchdowns. That's a great rookie season that puts him 6th all time in terms of rookie tight end output, behind Kyle Pitts, who had 1,000 yards and 1 touchdown, and Mike Ditka, who had 1,000 receiving yards and 12 touchdowns his rookie year. So, I mean, you're probably looking at, like, if you can get Gronkowski's rookie output, 546 yards, he had 10 touchdowns. I don't expect 10 touchdowns, but that's a pretty good rookie campaign for a tight end. Whereas that would probably run you like bottom half of rookie wide receivers when it comes to guys that are expected to step in and start right away. So I think expectations versus reality need to be tempered a little bit. I mean, if you can get, I mean, you joked about it, Paul, but if you can get Noah Fant, right? Noah Fant had 40 catches, 562 yards, and 6 touchdowns his rookie year. That's pretty good.
Isn't that terrifying? He's got 6 touchdowns. He's got 6 touchdowns.
Sorry, he had 3 as a rookie.
Yeah, 3. I was going to say. Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think he's not scored a touchdown in 3 seasons.
Yeah, so he's got 3, and he's got 3 in the remaining 3 seasons. Yeah.
Right. Well, the other side of that argument to me is that it's not necessarily Dorsey, right? I think a lot of tight end production is because the offense under Josh, I think this is sort of a Josh problem. This might be a conversation for another episode, right? I think a lot of times is Josh gets off schedule, right? And it might be a car episode, Mar, right? Like it's, I think Josh gets off schedule, right? Because you see like that when he's on the script, right? Those routes are tight, they're timed, yards after catch. As you get later into games, you see those dropbacks take another step or two, right? You see him buy a little bit more time to his right, buy a little more time to his left. And for tight ends, those are route killers, right? Because your tight ends aren't going to be able to generate that separation for all that long. They're going to be able to generate separation in short windows. The longer your quarterback takes, the smaller that window gets for your tight end. So you want to complain about Dawson Knox production all you want. That's fine. That's the offensive line and Josh Allen's fault, right? Because as soon as you get off schedule, the windows for completions of tight ends get smaller and smaller and smaller. And I think to the point of the athletic tight ends, when you look at their production, you say, well, they're a great athlete, but that athlete at that position doesn't get the time to run the routes effectively, depending on the quarterback and offensive line. I really think that that's probably the primary reason you've seen tight ends just not be as effective, even though they're better athletes than they were 15 years ago.
I think that's where Kincaid brings a different skill set, though, than Knox. And I think I don't want to compare it. Listen, I'm not going to compare Kincaid to Kelsey in terms of that's who he's going to be, right? But he's much more Kelsey-esque in terms of how he runs routes, which is he works really well in the area where there's nobody, and he finds those spots in the zone. He's very, I guess for whatever, let's call it Beasley-esque, right? He kind of works in that slot really well where he can create separation in those short windows. But then when things go off script, he seems to kind of find those open spots in the field and just kind of sits down and gets open. Where Knox is much more of a go run a route, create separation, catch the ball, and then have yards after the catch type of tight end, where he doesn't work well with the way that Allen plays, because Allen plays a lot of playground ball, which is I guess a fun way of saying that he gets off schedule, which is what Paul's trying to say. So he scrambles around. There's not separation. You're running a route. Once Knox runs his route, he doesn't really know what to do beyond that. He doesn't work well if the ball doesn't come his way after he gets out of his route, where you see wide receivers working back towards your tight end, mirroring the side of the field, whatever they're trying to do. That's where Kincaid's strong suit comes from. And I think that's why a lot of people expect him to be a better fit for Allen's game, because he finds those open spots in the zone. He can win the matchups in the slot when it comes to the off the line of scrimmage, create separations. But when things go not as planned, and Allen starts to Allen, Kincaid's going to be able to find those spots in the zone, kind of sit down and make himself a big target for Allen to find in the intermediate section of the field.
And I think when you look at those guys, Amar, you tell me, right? I think
Allen starts to Allen. That's just beautiful.
Well, that's true. Yeah, I think that's a phrase that I'll hear Joe say all the time. Allen on the drop back, rolling to his
There's
right.
Allen again.
Allen gonna Allen.
Yeah.
But Mar, like when I think of great zone tight ends, right? Like Ryan was just saying, two in recent memory come to mind, and that's Greg Olsen and Jason Witten, who just lived in those soft zones, right? Yeah. Now, mind you, Jason Witten was 2 inches taller and 25 pounds heavier than Dalton Kincaid, but Greg Olsen is only an inch taller and only about 10 pounds heavier. And you look at Dalton Kincaid, is that inch and 10 pounds a big separator? Is that a reason to be concerned that he doesn't have the size to be that level of player, that type of player? Because those guys were pretty sturdy at the position.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, what he may lack in the physicality department, he may make up with in quickness. Now, the thing that I wanted that I was going over, and I looked up the Buffalo Bills draft over since, the Bean tenure. What I really like that they're going to be doing with him, and I was watching a bunch of film on him this week as well. You're not going to be asking Dalton Kincaid to be doing anything that he isn't already doing or hasn't already done at the college level. You're not asking him to do anything different. Look at the Buffalo Bills' first-round pick since Bean has been here, guys. Tremaine Edmonds was an outside linebacker. Where'd you put him? Josh Allen did not run the same type of offense at all. He was very green. You had to be put into Daboll's system and learn it. You look at Ed Oliver. He had to do something a little bit different. He was a nose tackle at Houston. Rousseau was probably the only guy on this list that actually did what he was doing in Miami that he came to the Buffalo Bills to do. But then you look at Kiri Elam, he played mostly man. You come into a zone scheme system.
You're absolutely right. And Mark, hard pause on Rousseau. Remember, Rousseau didn't play the year he was drafted.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that was right. So that. He missed his entire season with it.
He didn't play that season.
Yeah.
Right.
So you look at all this stuff. Kincaid, you're bringing him in here to do exactly what he just did in college. You're not, all the other first round picks that you've done with the Buffalo Bills, they've had to do different things with those guys. So that being said, I think the possibility of philosophically what you're going to do with this offense, will Kincaid, let's put it this way. If you thought of 5 problems that the Buffalo Bills offense had last year, what right now could you name that the Buffalo Bills, he solves right now? Red zone? Yeah. Taking
zone beater.
Zone beater. Taking pressure away from Diggs and Davis. You can run screens with him. There's nothing wrong with you running a screen. that you didn't have before. A bunch of different things that you could do right now. If you name 5 things wrong with the Buffalo Bills offense in 2022, he solves at least 3 or 4 of those right now.
And the truth is, right, one of the reasons that makes Kansas City so dangerous is because Kelsey's a move tight end, right?
Yes.
At his size is a move tight end, and so's Kincaid. Kincaid's a move tight end. You can move him anywhere you want. But Mar, did I just hear you say that the Buffalo Bills 2023 draft class is the "we are who they thought they were" draft class?
That's why we took the damn field.
Hey there.
Crown ass. No. But that's what a great time.
But
to end
Steve
it,
Hampton
Paul.
brings up a great point about Rousseau. Rousseau didn't start as a D-line.
Oh, he did. Okay. So that makes my point even more. I mean, the only first round pick in the Bean McDermott era that actually played where he was going to be was, I don't know, Diggs. I mean, let's think about it here. I mean, it's an interesting concept because, Paul, you always tell me all the time with those guys in Florida, all they do is play man.
Mm-hmm.
And the Bills run a zone concept system in the cornerback. So they
Greg
have to
Rousseau
learn
in high school. Greg Rousseau in high school played wide receiver, by the way.
Stop it.
Yeah, he did safety and wide receiver.
Is that how he
played a little
Mahomes?
defensive end, but played primarily safety and wide receiver.
Let's hope Osiris slots.
Could you imagine Greg Rousseau at safety? Good.
I couldn't imagine Javadian Clowney played halfback. I don't get that either.
That I could imagine.
Like a high school
Mario,
level?
picture high school as a quarterback dropping back, and Greg Rousseau's the safety, like the roaming safety.
Nope.
It's like having a tumble back
coming off the edge on a safety blitz.
I can't imagine being a
safety blitz.
Can you imagine being a wide receiver? The coach is like, "You got to run a post on this." I'm like, "No, I don't."
You better call it a hot route.
Coach, I'm making a business decision. I'm playing soccer. Yeah, I'm out of here. I'm not doing that. All right, guys, listen up. Thank you for joining Hashtag Sports. Make sure you
the hottest hitting safety in the league. I put the team on my back.
Are you doing the Greg Jennings thing again? Yeah. He put it on his freaking back. All right, make sure you hit all our socials: TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. All of our episodes will be on iTunes and Spotify. Smash that like and subscribe button before you leave. For Joe, Ryan, and Paul, I am Mario. We're Hashtag Sports, and we're out of here.
Hello, fellow Bills fans. Sean Rogers, realtor and lead of the Mr. Rogers Homes team. Did you know that real estate is one of the best ways to build wealth, and right now is one of the best times to own an investment property in Arizona? Please reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to answer any of your questions so we can take the next step to your financial freedom here in the Valley of the Sun, utilizing real estate. As always, God bless America, and go Buffalo!